On January the 1st, 2021, African countries began officially trading under a new continent-wide free trade area. The African Continental Free Trade Area aims to bring together 1.3 billion people in a $3.4 trillion economic bloc that will be the largest free trade area since the establishment of the World Trade Organization. Every African country except Eritrea has signed on to the Free Trade Area Framework Agreement, and 34 have already ratified it. Although such an action could be interpreted as a continuation of globalization, it may take decades before African countries create a single market, common currency, as well as common fiscal and monetary policies. In the meantime, a sovereign debt will remain the biggest issue for most African economies. As Thomas Sankara, former leader of Burkina Faso, once said, "Debt is a cleverly managed reconquest of Africa, aiming at subjugating its growth and development through foreign rules." I'm your host Kasim, and thanks for joining me for another KJ Report. In this video we will have a geopolitical forecast of Africa in 2021. Just before we start, please kindly visit our website kjreports.com and subscribe to one of our plans which will give you unlimited access to all of our geopolitical content. Please also join us by supporting us on Patreon. Your support is critical for the survival of KJ Reports. We think that debt has to be seen from the standpoint of its origins, but debt's origins come from colonialism's origins. Those who lend us money are those who had colonized us before. Thus each one of us become the financial slave, which is to say, a true slave, said Thomas Sankara at the summit of the Organization of African Unity, now the African Union, in Addis Ababa in 1987. Although G20 countries have already put in place a moratorium on interest payments for some 47 countries, most of them in Africa, the debts will unlikely ever be written off. Instead, African nations can expect to remain in a neocolonial position at least as long as they have significant natural resources. As Frantz Fanon, a French Western Indian author, explained in his book The Wretched of the Earth, colonialism hardly ever exploits the whole of a country. It contents itself with bringing to light the natural resources which it extracts and exports to meet the needs of the mother country's industries, thereby allowing certain sectors of the colony to become relatively rich. But the rest of the colony follows its path of underdevelopment and poverty, or at all events sinks into it more deeply. In East Africa, the United States, China, Russia, Japan, India, Turkey, France, South Africa and the European Union are all vying for influence and control over energy flows. The Red Sea, according to a series on its growing importance by Africa report, has become a magnet for outside powers vying for its control. While it is clear that freedom of navigation through the Red Sea and the Suez Canal is a goal shared by all, tense regional dynamics in Sudan, Ethiopia and Somalia augur an era of ongoing instability in this heavily contested region. The Russian-African Summit, hosted in 2019 in Sochi by Russian President Vladimir Putin, signifies Moscow's interest in becoming a major player in the continent. On November 16, 2020, Putin authorized his Ministry of Defense to sign the formal agreement with Sudan to create the permanent Russian military base in the northeast African country, guaranteeing Russia's first substantial military foothold in Africa since the fall of the Soviet Union. According to some Russian authors, Russia's new base on the Red Sea means that Moscow's maritime activities in the region will extend southward far beyond Sudan, ensuring a permanent presence in the Indian Ocean, which was lost in the post-Soviet years. Since 2016, Russia reportedly negotiated the free entry of its ships to ports of nations such as Sudan, Eritrea, Egypt, Mozambique and Libya. Given that the United States and its Gulf allies have not officially opposed Russia's plan to build a base in Sudan, such a decision is likely part of another tacit deal between foreign actors. The base is likely to help the Kremlin establish control over the transit flows of oil that pass via pipelines through the region. The bulk of local oil fields are located in neighbouring South Sudan, but its oil exports are almost entirely dependent on the Republic of Sudan. The only pipeline through which landlocked South Sudan can transport its energy passes through the territory of Sudan, its northern neighbour. Thus the Kremlin's involvement in Sudan is likely motivated by energy. On the other hand, in neighbouring Djibouti, the United States, France, Italy, Japan and China already have their own naval bases, which helps them control the oil transit in the region. Still, major global powers are not expected to directly confront over Africa's resources in 2021, but new proxy wars in the continent are entirely possible. Africa is slated to hold 30 national elections in 2021. 4 countries in sub-Saharan Africa undertaking elections this year are facing armed conflict: Chad, Ethiopia, Libya and Niger, and Somalia. Presidential election in Somalia is expected to reflect the country's geographic importance in the Horn of Africa and as an epicenter for violent extremism in East Africa. The election may have far-reaching security implications for Somalia and the broader region, especially given that Qatar and Turkey have been strong supporters of President Mohamed Abdullah Mohamed and the federal government, while the UAE has backed the 5 federal member states. In Niger, whichever candidate wins the presidential election, it will be a milestone for the West African nation, since it will be the first democratic transfer of power this country of 22 million people has experienced. President Mahamadou Issoufou is stepping down following his second 5-year term in office, and his successor will have to deal with increasingly aggressive set of insurgencies from militant Islamist groups. In Chad, President Idriss Déby is seeking his 6th term in office. He is expected to win the election, and the country's economy will remain heavily dependent on oil revenues. Over the past few decades, the oil export income has not been used for the nation's development. 47% of the population lives in poverty, and Chad ranks 162 out of 198 countries on Transparency International's Corruption Perceptions Index. Ethiopia has suffered from the growth of ethnic militias and a spike in ethnically based violence in recent years, primarily after a confrontation between Tigray Regional Government led by the Tigray People's Liberation Front and the federal government escalated into a full-blown armed conflict in November 2020. Regardless of the outcome of the parliamentary elections scheduled for June the 5th, Ethiopia's large and diverse population could easily face more ethnic conflict throughout 2021. The economic activity in countries such as the Ivory Coast, Senegal, Ghana, Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania has slowed significantly, but they are still managing to grow, according to the International Monetary Fund. On the other hand, oil producers such as Algeria, Angola and Nigeria have suffered very badly from the plunge in crude prices, especially in the early months of the coronavirus crisis. Countries that depend on tourism, particularly Morocco, Tunisia and the Seychelles, have been hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. South Africa, the continent's second biggest economy, has been hit the worst given that it was already in recession before the crisis hit. The World Bank's projected 3.3% drop in productivity for sub-Saharan Africa will likely push the region into a recession for the first time in 25 years. This will worsen an already terrible poverty situation, pushing another 40 million people in the continent into poverty, argues African author Chinedu Andrado. According to updated forecasts for the African Development Bank, people in West and Central Africa faced a higher risk of falling into extreme poverty due to the pandemic, but COVID-19 would also deepen poverty in East and Southern Africa. In its Global Economic Prospects report, the World Bank predicts extreme poverty and depressed economies in Africa for 2021. According to the World Economic Forum, Africa's 1.3 billion people may have fared better than expected in terms of containing COVID-19, but the pandemic has dealt a severe blow to already weak health services, raising fears of excess deaths from other illnesses plaguing the continent. COVID-19 could cause 1 million excess deaths from diseases such as malaria, HIV and tuberculosis. Overall, malaria, Ebola, yellow fever and polio have had more impact on the continent than the novel coronavirus. Lack of potable water makes hand washing a distant luxury, especially given that the majority of the African workforce rely on daily pay to survive. Thus 2021 will unlikely bring any major improvements for the African population, unless for those that manage to migrate to Western Europe. That's all for today guys, thanks for watching another KJ report. I hope you enjoyed this video and would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think the future holds for the African continent? I would love to hear your views in the comments below. Please don't forget to visit our website kjreports.com and subscribe to one of our subscription plans which will give you unlimited access to all of our content. Please also become a member of our Patreon page and support us from as little as $1 per month. Your support is critical for the survival of KJ Reports. Thanks for watching again, and see you next time.